Sure, cool. Thank you.
Finally made it to the big table, huh, Sean?
It's a pilot program, putting him up here.
Chief, whenever you're ready to start.
All right, good evening. Thank you for
evening.
having us tonight. We'll start on page 1, which is basically the department structure. Let's see, there we go. Slide 2 is our workforce. As you see, we're still at 250. We didn't increase, but something I would like to draw everybody's attention to. We've been working very hard over the last several years to diversify the workforce, and with that, I'm proud to say that we are over 25% minority and female at the police department. We've made great strides in these efforts over the last 5-6 years, and we're very proud of that. Uh-oh. The next page is our civilian workforce, where you'll see there's an additional 1 spot there. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's about our social service coordinator, outreach worker that we want to add to it. The next slide is our workload service levels. That's our calls for service. We're in line with our 5-year average of 122,000, so there's a little deviation each year, a little up, a little down. The next slide is our Part 1 index crimes. As you'll see, since 2000, there's been a steady decline of about 34% to last year, including an almost 8% reduction last year in our Part 1 index crimes. Department structure. At this time, this is the breakdown of the operations division. The department is broken into 3 divisions. As you saw earlier, this is the operations division, which is the largest division in the police department, often referred to as the uniform section. I'm not going to go through them all, but you'll see it's the home to several specialty positions and specialty units in the department. The next division is the criminal investigations division. Again, just another breakdown. The division is broken down by our property crimes, crimes against person, proactive. Again, not going to go through the whole thing, but what I would call your attention to is you'll see in 2019 calendar year, CID had 1,349 cases assigned to them. They cleared 1,311 of those with 537 arrests. The next division, our administrative division. This is kind of the unsung hero in the department, the one that keeps the doors open and keeps us working there, Sean. That's a call out to you, buddy. What you'll also see under there is that our FOIA officer and our information system specialist under there couldn't speak more to the importance of those 2 positions as our migration to more and more technology, digital evidence, is just a huge part of our department. Eventually, we'll probably have to look at adding to those positions. And our FOIA officer, I believe we handle most of the FOIAs in the city. Again, it just continues to grow every year, whether that's for body-worn camera, video footage, or that's just paper FOIAs. It just continues to grow. The next slide is our budgeted funds. As you'll see here, there's just a breakdown. Everything in red is a restricted fund. The next slide is our budget over all funds. As you'll see there, our operating lines make up about 16% of our budget, and 84% of it is personal services. The next one is our budget by cost center, again across all funds. What you'll see here is that we put together a maintenance budget that increased by less than, or right around 0.5%, 0.55%. But you will see a large increase in our personal services fund, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. On the next slide, we'll talk about that increase in our personal services line, up about $1.1 million. That's basically a lot of that's our contractual stuff. To go with that, that will include the new social service coordinator that we've been talking about. If you take out the personal services, we have about a $94,000 increase in our budget. Let's get a little more into the personal services. The reason for the increase is potential retroactive settlement to our contract, increased pension cost, slight increase in our employee share of health care, and then our new homeless focused deterrence outreach position, as well as the natural growth during our longevity increases. Under the next one, we'll talk about our accomplishments there. You'll see our e-citation, e-crash. That's been huge for us. We're in the process of rolling it out now. It should be done by the end of this fiscal year. It's going to make our officers more efficient out there and professionalize our department. Our K-9 Academy upgrades that you guys have been so gracious with us over the last couple of years to really bring that around. It's a huge improvement out there. I'd invite you out any time to see it if you would like to come. An upgrade to our body-worn camera systems. We're in the process now of switching out our old cameras for new cameras as part of our contract. These have a longer battery life for us. The old ones were 10 hours. These are supposed to be up to 14 hours. Continued community outreach with our Citizens Police Academy, our Junior Police Academy, our Teen Academy. Our BLAST program, which is new this year, was a joint venture with U.S. Attorney's Office to target high school kids, trying to build lasting relationships with our high school students, with law enforcement, and educate them on what we do out there and why we do it. Our continued NPO events, our Safe Passage program. We put that in order to prioritize getting people into treatment for addiction to substance abuse. We entered 18 people or referred 18 people this year. 9 have completed the process. 3 are currently enrolled. 2 were discharged for medical reasons. 3 left against the advice of staff. And 1 never followed up when we recommended it. The full implementation of the Homeless Outreach Team program. Chris has done a great job for us out there. Officer Jones has done a great job for us out there, but he's just one person. We think supplementing him with a social worker will help us have a better opportunity to get those who need services. Implementation of our Project Safe Neighborhood program, our camera registration, and our crime prevention campaigns. Again, trying to continue to stress this. I think we're up to close to 200 on the camera registration, last time I checked, and our crime prevention campaigns. Again, one thing is a huge driver in our crime stats and making us one of the most dangerous cities when they put those stats out is the fact that it comes down to unlocked cars, burglars to unlocked cars, theft of vehicles because of unlocked cars and keys or fobs in the cars, as well as retail theft. Those are the drivers in our crime stats, and trying to get the help from the public to take those steps forward to help us combat that by taking a few extra moments just to secure their vehicles and their belongings. The continuation of our focused deterrence program in an effort to reduce gun violence. We conducted 2 call-ins last year involving 15 targets, conducted 6 custom notifications. 18 of the 21 people that we had call-ins or custom notifications with have not reoffended with gun offenses. Continue our emphasis on community policing initiatives, including our recruiting and diversification of the workforce. Some of our goals going into next year is to continue the focused deterrence program as well as the new homeless focused deterrence case manager. To talk a little bit about this position, what we're looking for is somebody who can wear 2 hats, somebody who can work hand in hand with our homeless outreach officer and our NPO unit. I see somebody that has a professional background and knows the ins and outs of social services here in Springfield, what resources are out there, and someone who can knock down the barriers to getting services. This position will be very demanding. We haven't put together an all-encompassing job description yet, but we have a lot of things that we want to do with it. I see them spending probably 65-70% of their time dealing with homelessness, but then the other 30% of the time dealing with our focused deterrence program as a professional case manager, working with contractual mentors that we've put in here to help keep the grant going, that were once funded by the grant, but to keep the program going. Somebody who can make sure that we develop success plans for people and keep people on task and try to improve our community by reducing gun violence. So with this, I'm looking for somebody who can deal with shelter and housing issues, food, addiction, mental health, education, job training, employment, child care, health care, Social Security, and disability. Those are all the things that my homeless outreach team is dealing with, as well as the people who are trying to mentor some of these people in our focused deterrence program. These are all the common themes that we're seeing. So we're looking for somebody who can wear 2 hats. Hopefully there's a perfect person out there that can help us do that. ILEAP accreditation. We've already started that process. We've reached out. Hopefully they'll be on site sometime here this spring. It's something we've been wanting to do for several years. It's just something that we haven't had time to do with all the other things we've been doing. So that's the priority this year, is to get that done. Our ShotSpotter rollout, we've been working with ShotSpotter. Now that the contract's been signed, the implementation phase is undergoing right now. Thanks to our partners in the community, as well as all the people out there who have allowed us to place sensors throughout the community. We appreciate that cooperation in helping us make our community safer. I talked a little bit about the Sustained Focused Deterrence Program. When the grant expired back in December, the 2 things we knew we needed. We knew we needed somebody who can continue on with the mentoring, as well as somebody who could do the outreach management and case management of that program, and that's why we have that in here. Expand our traffic services. What we want to do and what we're going to research this year is looking at what we can do on the second watch hours to free up our officers to handle calls for service, to reduce response times. And what we're looking for is somebody there who can, deal with the parking complaints, deal with the nuisance calls, the barking dog calls, the animal complaints possibly, not the neglect stuff that animal control would come out with, but somebody who could take the responder versus an officer, but also handle private property accidents, just to free up the officers. The other thing is we do so many details with the downtown that we could assign these folks to that versus a police officer standing out there at a much lower cost than what we're doing. So we're going to launch a study on that. We'll probably be coming back next year asking for a couple of positions to do that if the feasibility study comes out like we think it's going to. Continue to focus on crime reduction through innovative data-driven policing. Basically what we're looking there is we're looking for, you'll see in the budget, we've asked for Street Smart, which is a predictive analytics software program that can bring all of our software into one database or one dashboard so officers can respond car to car, have information shared from shift to shift, but also bring in some of the things we have out there, tying our CAD, our records management, as well as giving us real-time data in the police officers at their fingertips in the car. Continue to enhance our focus on crime prevention. Talked about that a little bit, especially these property crimes that we think can be prevented, that we can drive down drastically. I would love to see a 10 to 15% drop in our burglary to motor vehicles. I think that's very achievable just through education. And that's something that I know you folks do at your neighborhood meetings. I know that you do it through your daily contacts. But it's something we just got to get that message out there. Another part is the camera registration, getting that out there. The cameras have been very, very helpful for us. We know there's a lot more than a couple hundred cameras out there in our community. And if they don't want to register, that's fine. But at least if they'd be willing to come forward when something happens to let us know that they do have those cameras so we can look at that information. Successful transition to NIBRs were required by the feds to move to a new crime reporting program called NIBRs, National Index-Based Reporting System. Is that correct? That's correct. As well as continue our leadership and staff development, and then implement a mentor program for new officers. Right now, we have officers who move to our community from out of state, out of town. They're not familiar with our community. We informally do some mentoring, but we want to make it a formal mentoring program to welcome these kids. Hopefully that will lead to better job satisfaction, better retention as we go forward. Even though retention hasn't been a huge problem for us, it is something that we do see. And last but not least, questions.
Alderman McManaman.
Thanks, Chief and staff. Your budget request is only 0.5% beyond last year, so that's a really, I think, a remarkable achievement. I've got, I think, 5 questions. Can you go to page 6 of the handout, which has to do with index crimes?
Yes, sir.
So it shows that we've gone from 9,000 index crimes in 2010 down to 6,000 index crimes in 2019. That's a 30% decrease. Have there been any changes in the crime statistic taking during that time period?
Those are the crime statistics that we report to the feds. That's the reduction we've seen over time. So that's your burglaries, your homicides, your rapes, sexual assaults. Help me out. What's the other? Burglaries, rapes, sexual assaults, homicides, or one more. What is it? Aggravated assaults.
So if the
There's been no changes in the reporting structure at this time. Next year there will be. We will no longer report under the uniform crime reporting. It'll go to NIBRs.
So if the statistical measuring formula has remained the same and constant for 10 years, this is a remarkable achievement also, and the public needs to know about this. And so maybe there's a way to I know it's not the same in every neighborhood, but it's a general trend, which is very positive. Okay, that's next question is on page 13 of the handouts. There's a new entry for debt service, $470,000. What's that debt service about?
That's the second year of our Motorola radio upgrade. We did the first year last year, that's the second year this year, and then we'll have a third year next year when it'll be paid off.
Okay. So how come it doesn't show up for last year? Or maybe it does. I don't see it listed for last year.
There was no debt service last year. It was paid out of the lines last year for the first
Okay,
one.
all right. Last question is, you talked about the homeless outreach effort. Now, contrary to what I was saying to the library, I think you definitely should be involved in some degree of social service to deal with a very problem-plagued population, because they create very high demands on calls for service. I did a request a year ago, and I think it was from the downtown neighborhood police officer or the statistician, and I asked, please provide a listing of all calls for service within a 4-block area of the library. And I was astounded, just completely astounded. It went for about 30 or 40 entries per page, and it went for about 10 pages. You know, indecent exposure, theft, battery, assault, you know, the whole gamut. And so we had a really serious problem there, and to the extent that we can devote resources to mitigate that problem, then your calls for service will decline. So I think you're doing an appropriate targeting with some experts dealing with the indigent population. So I think that's a positive step also.
Thank you.
Alderman Redpath.
Chief, you're listing your debt service on page 12 and 13. You realize that same debt service? Does that change your math a little bit?
No, I don't believe that changes our math. I'm trying to figure out why it's on both, to be honest with you. It should be the same. One's across the corporate fund, and then the other one's across all funds. We're showing across all funds, and the other one's showing across corporate funds, but it's the same amount.
Isn't it the exact same thing?
It's the exact same thing.
Okay. Hold on. Bear with me. And you said your personal services went up, what, $1 million?
Yeah, right about $1 million it went up. A lot of that, like I said before, has to do with the settlement of the contract that we were anticipating, as well as back pay, as well as the increased pension contributions, our share of the health care, as well as the new position we just talked about with the homeless deterrence person.
So on page 15, your safe passage program, is that basically your drug court, or is that different?
No, it's not a drug court. So basically, the Safe Passage Program is an initiative that we instituted in regard to some of the substance abuse, the homelessness, all of that. It's a cost-free program that we have partnered with Gateway here in town to prioritize treatment. So if somebody walks into Gateway and wants to get treatment, they have to come back for an appointment. They have to wait in line and take a number. Where basically we know that those that are actually in need of treatment and are willing to get treatment, if they flag down an officer, if they come into our front desk area, we will call. We know we have about a 24-hour window to get people into treatment before they change their mind, and within 24 hours we'll have them into treatment.
Do we participate in drug court with the court system over here? Like,
some of our cases get funded through drug court, but that's ultimately up to
that's a different program.
That's a different program. That's strictly up to the state's attorney's office.
Okay. On page 17, the social service position, is that a civilian or is that going to be a police officer?
That is going to be a civilian, an ideal candidate. We were talking about that today and over the last week. We would love to have somebody with a professional background in case management, as well as maybe social work or, psychology or some other related field. With 2 to 3 years experience is what we're looking for. Somebody who's preferably from our community, who knows the ins and outs, maybe has some relationships with some of the social services in town. Unfortunately, you could take somebody to service, but when they get caught trying to work their way through the red tape, the application process to get treatment, they become intimidated. They get frustrated with it. So we're looking for somebody who has that experience that can basically accompany people, meet them there, walk them through the process. Encourage them. Whether it's a 65-year-old or 70-year-old homeless person who might qualify for disability and Social Security but has never gotten it, or maybe he has a someone who has a power of attorney that isn't doing the right thing. These are all things that our homeless outreach team is dealing with. So getting somebody who's a little more, a company that can take some of that workload off, that can also help with that, and we can, refer some of there to free Chris up a little bit. We thought going the civilian route. We've looked at some other departments that are doing it. Sacramento's doing it. We're looking at some other departments to see what's working out versus putting another police officer out there doing that. We wanted to go this route. We have trained all of our neighborhood police officers in the homeless outreach team concept, so they kind of supplement Chris too. But as you all know, they're extremely busy with all the other duties that they're pulled with.
Well, I've asked this question every year, so just so you know, I'm not a fan of using sworn police officers to do social work.
And that's where I think
that's not what we train
come
for.
in, and we think that will be able to help us.
So next spot, the shot spotter. What's the cost of the shot spotter, and what's our annual cost?
It's Tom? $276,000 is the first year.
So the two hospitals are pitching on that, and then what's the annual cost? That is the annual cost. Okay. On the camera system, where you said you got about 200 people signed up on the camera system so far?
Yes, sir.
Is that a segregated area? Is it spread throughout the city? How's that look to you?
Yeah, they're just citizens from all over the community. We have people from every beat that have signed up for it. I think we've been trying to put the word out there. Obviously, we don't have access to your system. This is just something that would basically let us know where the system is at, that if we had an incident in the area, we could send an email to you asking you to check your cameras during a certain time frame. Say we had a burglary at, 110 Main Street, and we wanted to hit like a 4-block area during a certain time frame, and maybe say, hey, does anybody see anything out of the ordinary here? Maybe a vehicle around this time frame. And it's just basically asking for that cooperation in a mass way that can do it efficiently versus our guys walking and canvassing. We still canvass the area looking for cameras. We know there's more and more doorbells out there, and I don't want, I strongly encourage them. I don't care what brand you buy. We don't endorse any certain brand. But we also know there's a lot of private security cameras out there as the cost has come down. And, some of them you can't even see it. So sometimes we might even miss it when we're walking by. So again, it's just another way of getting the word out there of some cooperation. You will never be contacted by the police unless there was an incident in your neighborhood that we think you might have some information or maybe some potential footage
So
of.
the reason I'm asking that, Chief, is because in our neighborhood, where Sean and I live, the neighborhood associations put out, when something happens, we spread the word really quick. Timberlane East is where I live, and then Timberlane, those areas, it works really well. I think it's beneficial for you guys to talk to maybe our media people about buying a campaign to talk people into this program. That'll solve, as you guys know, that it's going to work. That'll solve a lot of problems, and it works in our neighborhood real well. The burglaries in our neighborhood of course, I got 30 police officers live in my neighborhood, so it works a little better. Works a little better in my neighborhood. But thank you for your presentation. Very good.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Conley.
Thank you. I have two different questions. First one, on page 16, I put notes around it. You talked about your continued emphasis on community policing initiatives, recruiting, and diversification. Can you kind of give a little more background on that? Are we actively trying to recruit within our own high schools?
We always recruit. We try to target everything from even at the middle school age, start teaching them about law enforcement through our junior police academy, through our teen academy, and citizen police academy. We have a 24/7, 365 recruiting team. We're constantly hitting job fairs, community events, et cetera. We will be opening up a lateral testing process probably in the next month. And then come March, we'll be opening up probably mid-March, early April for the entry-level hire that we do the test annually in June. So we are currently recruiting. If anybody's interested, they can go to our website. They can sign up to be notified when the actual test date is announced and when the actual application process opens up.
Thank you.
So if you know anybody, let us know, because we definitely need them.
I'll share that. So my other question, and I apologize because my eyes are just dawned with me today, and I'm looking actually at your line item budget, but it looks like for uniforms, body armors, ballistics, ammo, and then further down in your ammo, guns, and supplies, it looks like you've got significant decreases in your requests this year, and I was just wondering if that's because you feel that you're fully equipped, or Why is that? It's line, so your, last year's request was $150,000, and estimated final was $150,000, and then for equipment, uniforms, body armor, it's $100,000 this year, so that's a significant decrease. What's behind that?
Last year, we had a one-time purchase of throwover vest, threat level 3 vest, that would stop rifle rounds for all the officers. So they have a throwover vest. If they're responding to an active shooter, they can throw those over. Also, new ballistic helmets. We're replacing government surplus helmets that we replaced for the first time in 20-some-odd years.
So have you replaced all of them?
Yes, ma'am.
And in terms of other, I mean, do you feel that you have enough safety equipment? I guess that's kind of what I'm asking, because
Yeah.
I understand one-time purchases, but I don't think you should be waiting quite that long to be replacing things like that.
No, and with that, the council has been very good to us over the years. I know we had some lean years that we really cut back and replacement of items. We're very grateful and thankful for the money that you guys have provided us. We do believe that this would be a sufficient line for us this year.
Okay. And of course, if it's not, you'll come back again?
Absolutely.
Yes, supplemental.
Barring any surprises.
That'd be good.
I have a few items, and I think I've brought this up to you before, and you were talking about mentoring new officers, and I think it would be helpful to us and maybe helpful to your new officers if you would split up the beats to correspond with wards. Right now, I have 3 different neighborhood police officers, and it creates some problems because I have so many different neighborhood associations, and there's vacancies and there's turnover. So I think it would be a really good idea to split up the beats according to wards, because that way they get to know a specific area of town. It cuts down on the amount of space they have to cover. I mean, right now, Beat 500 is, it's huge. I just think it's a good idea. It's something to look at because it's difficult for us, and it'd save us a lot of time, and it would make them very familiar with a certain area of the city. I also get a lot of calls about, we have a lot of neighborhood watches in Ward 6, and a lot of them would like to be auxiliary police officers. And I have been told that you're not a fan of that kind of program, and I know other areas and big cities have auxiliary police officers. And I know a lot of our neighborhood watches feel like they are not as empowered as they could be because they're not recognized as, they're just your average Joe that is, being a nosy neighbor, when really they are trying to affect change in the neighborhood. And they're not, oh boy, I'm getting the look. I'm getting the look. But I'm not in law enforcement, and I'm just throwing it out there for consideration because I think it might be helpful to some people who are extremely invested in their neighborhoods, really want to see change, and have seen their neighborhoods go downhill as far as crime goes. And then my last item was on the social service hire for the hot officer assistants. Have you reached out to the Continuum of Care or Helping Hands or any of our other social service agencies to see if they could supplement that as well?
I have not reached out to the Continuum Care. I did send an email to, I don't want to mention her name in case she doesn't want that, but I was contacted by somebody who's involved in Continuum Care.
Yes.
And so I sent an email response to her as well as, I think it was the president and a couple other people that are involved in that Continuum Care. I think there was some confusion about what the position was and if it was going to conflict with what they're doing, and we actually see this as a supplement to what they're doing. The bottom line is that we have to get services to the people or people to the services. So this position would be out in the field, helping our officers. No offense, I know that there's a lot of people doing great things out there. I know Helping Hands does some outreach. I know that MBH does some outreach. But frankly, not everybody's doing outreach.
Right.
And kind of like, I don't want to say put Rashawn on the spot, but homelessness is a community problem, not a
It is.
police officer problem. We just step up because we catch everything that nobody else wants. So we're the first line that sees it and deals with it. So obviously we're trying to be proactive with it and do what we can with it. We would love to see more of the social services step up, work with our hot officers, our hot team in the field where people are at. Because sometimes these people will not go to the services. You can't get them there. So if we can't go to the services, we need to take these people to the services. And I would love to have a co-op program or a co-responder program, which we informally have right now. I know our neighborhood officer and our hot officers work very closely with MBH and some of the others out there to do more, but everybody has limited resources. So I'm not putting blame on anybody out there. So this is another resource that we are asking for to help address the gap that we have seen.
And I think some of these other social service agencies would be more than happy to help supplement the HOT program.
Absolutely.
Because it's necessary, it's needed. Officer Jones does a spectacular job. He lets you know when he's going to be out of town or, not around. He goes above and beyond. So
Thank you.
we're very thankful for that. Oh, the mayor.
Yeah, just to add what the chief, actually, this concept came from a community in Oregon. Talked to the mayor there, and they have actually, that's where Seattle is, they've actually seen a decrease in homelessness. They started out with the HOT program, and they went way of social service because they go to the encampments, they're more proactive, and as the chief pointed out, not everybody wants to talk to an officer, so it was, they've seen positive results going this direction. And unfortunately, with the social service agencies, they've been gutted through state budgets, and the resources are limited. So this is one way we can help be proactive, and that's why we're broadening it, just not with Officer Jones, but through all the MPOs. And one thing I brought up with that Alderwoman DeCenso brought up is, is expanding the MPOs to 10, one per ward. But I know you might want to weigh in on that because that would be an addition for officers. But if you'd want to speak to that, I think that's important because right now there's 8, I think. Is that how many?
There's one per
If you'd
beat.
want to speak to that. But from that standpoint, if I'm an alderman, I would think, why not have my own MPO, like you said? So that's something I'd throw out there and, just get your feedback on that.
You like that idea, Mayor?
Actually, I had that a couple of years ago, but I talked to the chief and he shot it down.
He did. And I'll be more than happy to explain my concerns about it. So I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but our beat system is developed by calls for service and types of calls for service. So the workload's evenly, okay? You may have, Ward 3 may have lower calls for service, but they have a higher type of calls for service that requires more manpower. They may have, unfortunately, more shootings that requires 4 to 5 officers to 8 officers to respond, versus maybe, say, Ward 10, where there's more of a retail theft, one-on-one officer encounter. So you have to look at everything, and you have to keep the workload easily. In a perfect world, we would have it by the wards, but it's something we monitor yearly to make sure it's not out of whack. All the growth on the north end a few years ago, and it's still growing up in the north end. It taxed our bodies, so we realized we had to put more bodies in that area, that beat, to help supplement that. It's something that we monitor on a regular basis. We just looked at it here this year, and the calls for service are still about equal where we need them to be at. But it's not just the number of calls for it, but it's the types of calls for service. So that's why you have Beat 500, which is geographically huge, but there's a very low call for service out around the lake areas. So that officer does cover more. As far as your question about neighborhood police officers, we know the value of the neighborhood police officers. They do a lot of work. They do a lot of quality of life issues for us. They catch a lot of stuff and divert a lot of stuff from the beat cars. Would I take more? Absolutely. But right now, for example, we're at 247 out of our 250 authorized strength. I have 20 officers who are currently in training at some stage or not. It takes a year to train an officer. It takes almost 12 months. The people we hired last January just got cut loose. The people that we are hiring this January that we just hired last week, they're no good till the end of November next year. Early November if we're lucky. That's why we're concentrating a little bit on the lateral program. I'm going to be coming to you folks in March or May, for another class, because we have been talking about for the last 2 years. We're in the third year of probably a 5 or 6 year huge retirement time. I anticipate another 16 to 18 retirements this year. We talk about recruitment and retention. ISP is stealing a few of your people like you do every year. The feds have stolen a couple of our people this year. We anticipate another one going. in the spring or summer. So it's constantly replacing. It's not the fact that on paper we may be where we need to be at, but it's not in the working. Right now I have 217 working officers out of 250 we're supposed to have. Like I said, 20 of those are in training. The rest are all either on military. I have one guy who's gone for 3 years. I have another who just formed me today in my lieutenant ranks, which is already, small. He's going to be gone. He's been gone for 8-9 months. He's going to be gone for another 9 months. I was just notified that a young lady, one of our young ladies, who's our neighborhood police officers, she's going for 9 months. So there's something constantly. And then you add your injuries, and unfortunately, we got some guys on some long-term, guys and girls on long-term injuries. And so that's how that affects our manpower on a daily basis. So one thing we have to balance is robbing Peter to pay Paul. Every one of my deputy chiefs are hitting me all the time. Hey, can I get another detective? I could really do this if I had another detective. Hey, could I get another guy on afternoons for traffic? You could really reduce these costs, sir. We just have to balance all the requests. If we could ever get to 250 officers, we would be fine. If we could get to where we're only retiring 8 to 10 people a year, which is our average until we hit the Clinton crime bill era, we'll be fine. But I see that being another 2 to 3 years away. We're an old department and a very young department. There's not a lot of people in the middle right now, so we're going to continue to see that wave. And so our manpower right now, our overtime last year and this year, we're going to use it to keep a safe amount of people on the street, to provide a quality service to the community. But that's going to be a cost there as we train more and more people. Again, like I said, we got 10 in the academy now. I anticipate another 8 to 9, maybe a few less than that, depending on who actually turns the retirement paperwork in May. And again, if we hire them in May, they're no good till next spring. That's the reality that we live in.
Alderman Gregory.
I just thank you, Chairwoman. I just had a question on one. I just want to make a statement. That is true. We do got to take services to our individuals who are struggling, trying to overcome something. I'm a wholehearted fan of that. It just is what it is. We got to take some of that stuff to them. Secondly, I just had some questions on the shot spotter. So is this? I imagine it's more than one. Is it going to be able to encompass the whole city or?
No, what we did is we used data from the last 10 years
Correct.
to come up on shots fired call and confirm shots fired, I should say. It encompasses most of what we refer to as beat 400, 300, takes in a little bit of 100 and a little bit of 800. Roughly, without having the map in front of me, it takes in the area down around Butler and Stevenson, over to Glen Eyre, north along the Taylor Avenue corridor, up around Southeast. Now, it does not take in the county area down there along Truman Road and all that. It does not take that in, or the Stanford extension there. It kind of cuts through there. Then it goes up and it kind of spreads out all the way up to Clear Lake. It then cuts over to about 16th Street, goes north to North Grand, comes over North Grand, comes down, I believe, Rutledge, takes in a little bit of the hospital area, and I believe it comes down Jefferson to take in St. John's, and then comes back down 11th Street to the south, is roughly. It's 4.2 square miles total. That's all we could afford with the funding that we had. We negotiated for well over a year, argued about blocks. We argued for a long time about just taking a couple blocks here. So
I was just asking because, it is what it is. Criminals are smart. They'll move a little bit to where you can't get to them as fast with that device. So I'm just thinking down the line and moving it. I don't know what's if we have to adjust by crime shifting to another area because of hot responses. I don't know if that's something we need to be ready for down in the future.
That is something we will monitor. Talking to peer cities who have the tools. They don't see a lot of crime shifting. They don't really see that a whole lot. Historically, where the shots fired at them is what they're still seeing, even though people know they're out there. We think it's going to be a very valuable tool as far as officer safety and response. We're going to know whether or not there's more than one shooter. We're going to know if it's automatic fire versus semi-automatic fire. We're going to know within 25 feet or 50 feet. Am I talking right there, Tom? 25 feet of where the shot came from. It's going to be a direct dispatch, so it cuts out the middleman. It will go to dispatch, but it'll also go to the officer's MDCs in the car, so they'll go directly there. We think it'll help us gather evidence quicker, hopefully lead to faster arrest. With that said, the opposite side is that I believe it's going to increase our calls for service. I believe it's going to increase our crime stats because we know there's underreporting going on out there. We don't have to look any further than a homicide up on North 14th last year, I believe it was, where the gentleman was shot in the car and nobody called. Everybody heard the shots, but nobody called till the next morning when his mother found him. This will, hopefully, if it occurs in those areas, this will take away that problem. It won't help when it's outside, but it will take away that problem in the area. Hopefully, we get there faster and, can render aid, get EMS there and save lives. But I will tell you that from every community we talked to, they said expect a large increase in your shots fired, your calls for service. The numbers we've been told is anywhere from 50% increase to 90% increase in some communities. So again, we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. But next year, those Part 1 index crimes, I hope they're about where they're at, but I anticipate them being higher due to the shot spotters.
One last thing, is there anything besides a gunshot that could trigger this? Like no large fireworks or nothing like that could trigger this? All right.
No, it can delineate between fireworks, between backfires, all of that.
Okay.
And if you guys want a presentation on it, we can arrange for the vendor to come in and do a presentation for the council before it goes live. If that's something everybody would be interested in, we could bring that in. I think it would be good for the community to know that. Just get a better understanding of exactly what the technology is.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Alderman Dahlman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, first of all, I want to say to the department as a whole, thank you for everything the men and women of the police department do on a daily basis. It's not an easy job, to say the least, and we've had some very bad instances and some not so bad in Ward 9 in particular, and I just appreciate the response that your department has given. I wanted to ask a point of clarification on something. Periodically, we hear a publication that lists Springfield, high on a list for crime issues, and every time I see that, I quite frankly can't believe it that we're as high as we are listed. And the department and the administration, and this is not just this administration, and this under your tenure, it's prior chiefs and prior mayors, have continually said it's the way we report our crimes. Can you shed a little light on that? Because I always wonder what that really means and why we can't make an adjustment to make it, if it's not reflective of a true ranking, how we could, I'm not saying we manipulate data, but what can we do differently to help the city?
Well, I think it's twofold. So first, the way people report crime. There's different interpretations of what the federal guidelines are and the state guidelines on reporting a crime. For instance, if I roll down the street in a car and I point a gun at 4 subjects sitting on the corner and say, I got you, that's 4 aggravated assaults, okay? Some communities report incidences versus victims. You're supposed to report victims in that incident. So that's 4 aggravated assaults. It was 1 incident, but 4 aggravated assaults. Some communities report incidents. That's not the way it's supposed to be done, and but we know from talking to other communities, that's how they report. That's, it's not our job to tell them how to report. We believe we report accurately and factually. There's different interpretations about what those standards for each of those crime sets are. The other issue I think that really plays into it goes back to shopping areas. I look at our retail thefts last year compared to our peer cities. We are much, much higher. Why are our retail thefts higher? I don't know. Is it because the security people in our stores are better? I can tell you, I don't want to call any certain store, but there's one business, we have 3 of them in our community, that is a huge driver in our retail thefts. They have a very proactive crime prevention unit and security unit that apprehends a lot of offenders. And not every community has the same shopping that we do. We're a regional shopping mechanism or a hub. So people come to our community to unfortunately steal. We have a mall that several communities don't have. Even some of our peer cities do not have malls. You take, for instance, Decatur. There are malls in Forsyth. So none of the crimes associated with the mall in Decatur go on the Decatur crime stats. It goes to Forsyth's crime stats. So not everybody has the same shopping makeup that we have. So when I look at 1,800 retail thefts, if I remember off the top of my head, somewhere around 1,800 retail thefts last year, compared to some of our peer cities, that was double retail thefts. That is huge. That's something that's kind of out of the police department's control about retail thefts, but as a huge driver in driving these stats when they include property crimes, because one of the property crimes they include is theft and larceny. And when you break down the theft and larceny and you look at our theft and larcenies, you'll see 3 main factors that step out: retail thefts, verbally unlocked motor vehicles. Those are the 2 biggest drivers of that. Our motor vehicle thefts, they're high. They're not always high. Some years they're higher. Last year we saw a large increase in motor vehicle thefts, and I don't have the stats in front of me. But with that said, almost 90% or more are to unlock vehicles. They're not breaking out windows and stealing cars and hot wiring cars, folks. They're getting keys and fobs that are in the cars. And not to call out, it happens to everybody. It's not just any one part of town. It's because we become so busy and tied up in our life that you go, a friend of mine did the same thing, and he calls me about it. I'm like, was your keys in the car? He goes, no, my key wasn't in the car. My key was in my wife's car parked next door that she had left unlocked, and then they took that key and stole my truck, with my gun in it, because, again, people leave guns, they leave valuables in cars. We just got to work better as a community to do better now. But those are some of the things that drive those stats. Those are things that we need to work on.
Transition to NIBRS will standardize some.
We hope to transition to NIBRS this year. We'll standardize some of the reporting. All law enforcement departments are supposed to be there by January 1st of 2019. We were on schedule to be there due to the grant we were awarded last year. I can tell you not every department is going to make it by 2019, so we'll have to work with the state to figure out it's going to, by 2021. January 2021.
So that could lessen the subjectivity and make it more objective?
That is our hope, but I can tell you that at classes we've been to, there's still disagreements on that. I think you're always going to have some interpretation there.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And then I want to build upon a question that Alderwoman DeCenso asked earlier about this new homeless coordinator position. And you had mentioned when she asked that you hadn't reached, or your department, hadn't reached out to the Continuum for Care or the Community Foundation and ask about that position and what it entails, what the job duties are. Is that correct?
That is correct. I have not reached out to them.
So I guess, if you were aware that position is being, it's been in the newspaper, it's been talked about. I think they had a job. We actually all received the job posting via email from one of the people involved a few months ago or a few weeks ago.
I don't know who developed that job description because we haven't done that.
What I would, the job posting maybe is a better way to put it.
We haven't posted any jobs. We haven't done any of that.
I didn't say you did. I said the Community Foundation or whoever was coordinating that coordinator position had a job posting, and they sent an email out. We all got that. But what I'm getting at is I've been through times when we had to cut positions that were non-uniform in the police department, and it was extremely difficult. There were individuals that I knew personally, individuals I knew did a good job, and you were here, and you remember those days. It was awful. And I'm very hesitant when I see a new position added. My alarm goes up immediately. I heard what you said about the position. I liked what I heard. But before you take any step at all, please reach out to whether it's the Community Foundation who's coordinating the effort or the Continuum for Care. I think it's Community Foundation. Reach out to them, have a conversation, learn what that's about. Maybe there's, building upon what you said, Alderwoman, maybe there's a room for a partnership where we don't have to hire somebody else. And because I know the city, what I heard, at least, I guess I'll ask the budget director, I heard the city was actually participating financially with this other position. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, then, how could we not know precisely what it's all about if we've agreed to help fund it?
I think we're talking about two different things. Maybe I'm misunderstanding
I can
what
answer
you're
that
saying.
if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
The Continuum of Care position, which we are funding through OPED, is more for coordination of all the agencies because they try to help perfect their operations, help with the grant, which we help with. So this position is helping the homeless. One's coordinating agency efforts. This one specifically towards the outreach associated with homeless. So it's different. And then the other thing, important part of it is with focused deterrence. That's when the chief said, it's been interconnected somewhat. And so that's why we thought there'd be a value with regards to that. So it's more intensive outreach that's not being done. And that's the whole key concept. But the coordinator position is to coordinate the agency's efforts. They have meetings monthly or what have you. But Juan Huerta and Val probably could explain, they go to those meetings. But that's why that coordinator position was hired, was to coordinate their activities because it's just a musical, chairs as far as who's in charge of the continuum. This way you have a coordinator that's overseeing all the continuum efforts associated as an agency level.
And I appreciate that explanation, Mayor. There's still a potential partnership there. What I'm getting at is, if the coordinator that's with the continuum of care is working with all the agencies that provide the direct services to the homeless population, and that coordinator, through whether it's through police contact or through the osmosis, whatever, learns of an issue, wouldn't that individual have the ability to say, okay, this homeless individual is experiencing XYZ problems, we need to get him in touch with this agency? Right. And again, all I'm asking is, I'd like you to have that conversation even before we get to the voting on the final budget. Explore it, take it, had an in-depth conversation. Maybe it won't be needed. Maybe it will be. But I think we owe it to your department. We owe it to the citizens. And we owe it to the homeless population to do our due diligence.
No problem. We will meet with them. I don't know when their next meeting. I'll check with Chris when the next meeting is and have a conversation with them. But again, it was my understanding of the job description that you're talking about. That's why I was confused a little bit. Has nothing to do with the outreach efforts that we were trying to do and supplement as basically instead of another police officer position, using a professional social worker for. And that's not a knock at any of the social services, but what I'm being told is that there's a lack of resources in the social service agencies and the continuum care members to go out and do outreach at night or in the evening or at the shelters. So this is what we've seen that for. So we'll be more than happy to have a conversation. If somebody has something that they can donate to that, like I said earlier, we would love to see every member of the continuum care come out and do outreach. If two of them did it on Mondays and two did on Tuesdays and two did on Wednesdays, we could have a team there. But it's my understanding they don't have the resources nor the money to do that. But we will talk to them, have that conversation, and then see if there's something that they can do. And if they do, then obviously we'll look at that and see how they can complement each other and work together on it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if the city is helping fund that position, obviously someone in our circle understands the ins and outs of what is being proposed, and I'm sure it can give you some guidance on who to talk to. So thank you.
Thank you.
We've had someone that's come before council before and who's out there every night and has now formed a 501c3, Julie Becker, and she knows the homeless community as well as anybody in this city. And I would think that giving her a grant for a certain amount of money would maybe, instead of hiring a full-time employee, might be a better use. She's already out there, boots on the ground. I mean, if I have extra anything, I give her a call. She takes people food. She takes them socks and blankets and pillows and finds them a place to stay for the night if they have nowhere to go. So we do have someone that has knowledge, has an in-depth knowledge of the homeless community. And I think that's a conversation that needs to be had too, and she would be more than happy to have it.
And that's fine, and we know that Ms. Becker does a great job out there. But
Yeah.
again, we're looking for somebody who has a professional services background that can walk people into professional services that they need. And I don't know what her experience is in case management.
She does
or even
that.
Even if she has a desire to do that, obviously, we're looking for that perfect person. And if she's that perfect person, when we do post this position, I would encourage her to apply. But we're talking about somebody who knows how to walk people through disability, through Social Security, through mental health, and break down those barriers and get them treated, to do needs assessments. Again, and like I said, Ms. Becker, from what I know of her, does a great job for the department and for the community as a whole. But again, I think that's a little bit different from what we're trying to do to get people off the streets and transition them into housing.
If I can, you just hit it on the head there. That's exactly what we're talking about. The left arm's got to know what the right arm is doing. That's what Alderman Donald was trying to say. That's what I think we're all trying to say, that we've got these serial problem makers. They're repetitive offenders, repetitive problem makers. And the left arm's got to know what the right arm is doing. The continuum of care is focusing on housing. That's one of their main focuses. And these indigent folks out there, we're trying to get them into a more stable environment. And so, police, you got to work with the continuum of care because they've got to focus on housing. And I know the problems are many and diverse for a particular individual oftentimes, but I think you got to communicate with the others working on the same type of problem.
Totally agree.
Alderwoman Conley.
Thank you. And Chief, I'd actually like to just applaud you for a slightly different approach than Alderman Donald, but I do appreciate you bringing this social worker position forward. That was part of the conversation around the Center for Health and Housing, and Mayor, you brought it up at that time that we do need someone in a professional capacity who has that kind of experience and background. I think we do put a lot onto your officers, and expecting them to have all of these different skills is admirable, how many people you have who step up to that task. But then you also tell us it takes almost a year to get people trained so they can come and be part of our force. And so if we can take some of that in a civilian sort of a position, I would certainly am very supportive of that concept. But we, again, just echo better connections with all of our existing services so that we aren't doing any duplication. I think that right now in social services, there's very little ground for duplication, because there have been so many gaps, and there's just gaping holes that have been introduced into our social services network. But I appreciate you taking this first effort. I appreciate, Mayor, that this was part of our original conversation and that you're following through with it right now. So definitely looking forward to seeing how this works with the other existing partners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Alderwoman Turner.
So, a couple of things. During the library presentation, this one, and I'm quite sure during the fire department's presentation, the issue of homelessness in Springfield is going to come up. It's a reoccurring theme, and I think that with all the comments that have been made, I appreciate all of them, but I think that what it does is it underscores the need for the city of Springfield to have a coordinated effort, a coordinated approach that we take ownership of. Not that we farm out to other agencies, not that we finance or provide funding for other agencies, something that we take ownership of and have control over, because we see how it impacts everything that every agency, every department that is under the city umbrella. So that's that. The other thing is, every year since I've been here, I always talk about all the white male faces for the police department and the fire department. However, tonight, I'm not going to say that, because what I am going to say is I applaud you for the increase in the minority officers that you have. It's a significant, may not seem like a huge deal, but it is a significant increase, and it really speaks to your out-of-the-box thought process that you've had on recruiting, hiring, and retaining minority officers. All of that comes into play. So I applaud you for that, and I really believe that the efforts that you've made over the course of the last couple of years will change the face of the people who are sitting at that table in a few years to come, because I understand that it's a process. You don't just walk in the door and all of a sudden, you're sitting at the table. It's a process. But the efforts that you've made over the last couple of years will lend itself to the change in the people sitting at that table, so that's great. The other thing that I want to commend you on is that, I'm a huge fan of your management style. I'm a huge fan of the community policing that you brought into the department, and that you stuck with it even when you got a whole bunch of pushback from the people that you were in command of. I commend you for that. And if you look at the goals that you have for 2021, all of them have that. You can see that community policing influence. And I think that is a real strong leadership move, and the way in which the department is moving. And I think that's great. And I also feel like that officers, it took a while, but they're buying into it. And just by the goals that your department has set for 2021. So I think that that's great, and I think that it is a role model for other comparable cities in central Illinois, that if they want to see what success in spite of adversity looks like, when you're talking about community policing and when you're talking about diversifying a workforce, they should really come and look at the Springfield Police Department, because you're doing a really good job in those areas.
Well, thank you. First off, it's not me, it's the department that does it. everybody, and we have 250 recruiters in our department. Everybody who's an employee of our department is a recruiter. And I should say there's 281 because our civilians stepped forward in that effort as well. It's the hard work of the men and women of the police department that drove down our crime stats. It's the hard work of the men and women who deliver services on the front line. It's not the staff here that does this. You know, we try to lead a vision. We task our middle management with helping us achieve our goals and set objectives to achieve our goals. And it's the hard work of the men and women at the bottom that do the job.
Anyone else?
Let me say one last thing. I know I'm good with Chief. Chief, you've done a great job. Thank you. I know we got one more presentation, and homeless will probably come up, and if we could just be respectful of them. You know, I don't even know what indigent mean. I started to look it up, but I didn't want to bother. Troublemakers and all that. You know, they people, they are peers, and you know, I take offense to it myself, and I'm just saying. So I appreciate if we just, you know, just stick to the budget, and we'll fix that.
Indigent means when you don't have much.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we want to keep rolling? Okay, Chief.
Good job, Sean. Put on a good show today, man. You represented us well.